Hi there again. This video is for entertainment purposes only. Thank you for visiting my channel once again. And if you're new, welcome. Please do not forget to press the subscribe button. Give a thumbs up for like. And please, always do share. Now, this is the 10th video of a series of videos on the playbook of supremacist ideology and practices. Now, in this video, this is the last one. It's been a long playbook. This is the last video, and what I'm gonna do is just give just an overall summary of the war on Gaza, Israel, and I'll bring Nazi Germany in there and sometimes refer to other examples, and just, tie it all in. And yeah, that's what we'll do. Just, after such a long playbook, it's nice to just sort of bring everything together. However, before I start that, I guess I should introduce myself. Now, as usual, I like to tell you that I like to read. And I prefer reading because in that case, I won't forget anything. And believe me, sometimes I can get carried away. Just talking without reading. I'll try to stick to what I have to say, but hey, I have to tell you what I have to tell you, even if it's not written on the paper. But, reading kind of guides me along and keep me sort of like in track, or on track rather. My name's Winifred Davis, and I am a psychic medium, shaman, a traditional and spiritual counselor and healer, and have been all these for the past 37, and in 1 month it will be 38 years. I'm also a poet, an author, essayist, and a former spoken word movement performer. Got a little tongue tied there. Now, I subscribe to no religion. And when I say that, I mean I subscribe to no religion. I believe in universal justice and truth. Now, with the impostor justice of man, there's an exception to every rule. With universal justice, there are no exceptions to its rule. The truth, well, there's no my side. There's no your side. The truth stands unopposed. There is only one truth. Now, please remember, I'm not here to lead anyone. I'm not here to convert anyone. Just as I don't want anyone to lead me. Each man must evolve according to his own light. So what I'm telling you, I'm not here to convince you. You can take it or leave it if you're ready to understand or have the light that I'm trying to shine, that my guides are trying to shine, then you will come to that light. If you're not ready, then you will not come to that light. There's nothing judgmental about that. Each man must evolve according to his own light. Now, my duty is only to my conscience. And my conscience is the light that guides the free will I was given at creation. Each of us was given a free will at creation and a conscience, a light to guide that free will. Now, it is that conscience that makes each of us responsible for our own action. We cannot blame our king country, the general, the bully, our parents, demon, or the devil. No. Each of us is responsible for our own action, and we are responsible because of the conscience, that light that we were given to guide our free will. Now, I'm just a vessel, a messenger, delivering messages from the collective, of which includes my many guides and members of the different hierarchies, including the angelic realm. No, I'm not being presumptuous when I say that I get messages from the angelic realm and archangels. Each of us has the capacity to communicate with the angelic realm, with the archangels. Each of us has at least one guide. Some of us have many guides. Some of those guides have been with us from the moment of creation, and some we've gathered on the way. Some are in and out, depending on what our purpose in a given lifetime is. Then we will have some of the guides who are different, and they go according, as I said, to what our purpose is. Now, getting those messages, now, this is what I chose to do in this lifetime, and I've done it in other lifetimes, and I've lived thousands and thousands of lifetimes, just as many of us have, as we try to bring equilibrium to our souls. Now, as I get these messages, I have to take my ego. I have to forget about me, because the messages are not about me. It is about the message. So the messenger is not the story here. The message is. Now, getting these messages from the collective, those messages are truths, right? They're the truth. And so, what we have is that sometimes they're brutal, rather harsh, but we have to face them. When we look in the mirror of self-reflection, sometimes the image, the reflection that we see in that mirror, it's not a very pretty one. I know, believe me, I know. But as I said, face that reflection, that image, we must, if we are going to do better and ascend up that ladder of soul restoration, bring equilibrium to our soul. It's not easy. It's arduous. But step by step. And sometimes we fail. We're trying and we fail. But all we have to do, cut ourselves some slack and try again. Now, what I tell you, if you do not understand, please ask me a question in the comments below or go to my website. Okay, email me, I should say, rather. And my email address is also below. Now, if I say something, say exactly what I say. If I say the sky is blue, even though the sky I said is blue doesn't necessarily mean that I said sky blue, because sometimes the sky is not even sky blue. I didn't say sky blue, I said blue. I didn't say marine blue, I didn't say navy blue, I didn't say turquoise blue, I said blue. That incorporates all shades of blue. And if I tell the story of a tiny fish swimming in an aquarium, a small aquarium, repeat that story exactly as I say it and as I said it, because by the time you will try to interpret it, you might add a little embellishment and say it's a goldfish, and well, sometimes by the time you get to the 10th person, it's become a whale. That tiny fish has become a whale, even though you might have said a tiny goldfish. And a whale is not even a fish, it's a mammal. And they'll say that that whale is swimming in this vast ocean, and a small aquarium is surely not a vast ocean. Right? So say exactly what I say, because some me get it, some me sell it. As I get it, that's exactly how I deliver my messages, right? And even though sometimes those messages are harsh, I will say them because that is the task that I chose, and I must honor that contract. So, me now go hold me mouth a ground fi talk. Left me make me talk. I will say it without face planting and mumbling and trying to say it in a pretty way so that I do not cause offense. I have to say it how I must say it. Now, do not, when I call out folly, do not use the folly that I call necessarily because of a certain mass. Do not use it as an excuse for bigotry. At times I will discuss at length current events as I see fit, because they fit into what this channel is about, which is the truth that is reincarnation and its many facts. And right now, this is a very special period that we're going through, a coupleness over period, I call it, when the whole world is affected, the environment is affected, everything and everyone on this earth is affected with what's going on now. You know, it's climate change, all these endless wars all over the place. There are always wars and all of this stuff going on. But right now it's everywhere, everyone, everything. It's like Revelations, end times, the apocalypse. But really it's not. We will go on. And usually, in some parts of the earth, there have always been Armageddon, apocalypse, end times, revelation. But as I said, this particular period, and I explain why it is so, is a special one. It's one of the cup runneth over, what I call cup runneth over, fewer, greater transitions. And included in that too, it's because of an accumulation of karmic debt. Sometimes it runs up, and there's just so much. So, we need all this mass awakening, mass forgiveness, unconditional forgiveness and love in order to try to balance the scales. Now, please do not forget that there is no peace still in Gaza. The war on Gaza has not ended, not one iota. It is now back on track, just as it was a couple days after October 7th. The starvation is still there. And now, yesterday, the famine is back. The dirty water, because Israel has destroyed all the water facilities and it has now cut the water off again. There's no clean drinking water in Gaza. No aid, those tent cities. And remember, I spoke once about those dormitories. Dormitories. I wrote about it. That is what awaits Gaza, and I can see signs of it. You can check my work, my videos, and my books from late 2023 into early 2024, and all along you'll see everything unfolding just as is. So please do not forget the children of Gaza. Do not forget the children of Yemen, Lebanon, in Iran, in Sudan, in DRC, anywhere where children are suffering. They shouldn't be suffering, especially because of adults and their forever wars. And when we think about it, there is actually enough in this world, on this earth, so no one should be hungry. No one should be hungry. But unfortunately, so much of the world is hungry, without shelter. So many refugees because of supremacist ideology and practices, our quest and lust for power. And oh my goodness, to what end? To what end? We are but tenants on this earth, and if only each of us knew the ancient knowledge, the truth that is reincarnation and its many facts, then maybe we wouldn't try so hard with our supremacist ideology and practices and cause so much pain and suffering, especially to children and babies. Now, once again, this video is for entertainment purposes only. And as I sit here and as I'm going to say this, something comes in my head and I'm thinking about the war on Iran with Israel and America. And all I hear in my head is, I'm not a singer, but I'm going to attempt to sing here. It is actually, I'm taping this and it's actually almost 4 o'clock in the morning. That's how I work. And all I'm thinking is this, do not trouble Zion, for Zion has the key to open sinners' heart. Do not trouble Zion. Do not trouble Zion, for Zion has a key to open sinners' heart. Do not trouble Zion. And then I remember again, I call Israel and Netanyahu the temptress of America. We could say the collective West. He keeps tempting them over and over again with the same tired thing, the same old apple. That apple is so stale. It's rotting actually, but they still get tempted to eat that forbidden apple. And I'm just thinking, I did a video with regards to Joe Biden before he when it was his administration, and then just at the beginning, just shortly after October 7th. And it's sort of like when I said, when the archangel Gabriel sounds his trumpet, Mr. Biden, what will your answer be? And I thought about Mr. Netanyahu, and in it I had put that he was holding Joe Biden, right? He had him dangling on a rope, and Joe Biden as well had his fingers, and he was hanging. It's just those 10 fingers were keeping him from succumbing to gravity, because he had those fingers hanging on the ledge on the 99th floor. And Netanyahu, all he was going to do was just stomp on those fingers and gravity would take care of Joe Biden. Well, I guess it kind of did. Not just of Joe Biden, because he wasn't running, but of the Democratic Party. And in it I put, there's a song, an old chorus there where it says, my young companion, fare thee well. I will not go with you to hell. I'm on my way to Canaan's land. I will not go with you. And that's what I said Joe Biden should have told Anthony Blinken and all those neocons, Brent McGurk, what's his name, Sullivan, all those neocons, whether they are Republicans or Democrats in his administration. He should have told them that might have saved us from the whore in Babylon. But what's to be must be. And Kamala Harris, she just didn't have the moral courage for a speech, a phone call, and a meeting. Read my book that explains exactly why. What is to be must be. Maktub, maktub. Now, remember, once again, this video is for entertainment purposes only. War of Providence. That's the war on Gaza. All that's happening, not just Gaza, but especially Gaza, and what's happening in the West Bank, and of course now Lebanon, Iran. War of Providence, exemplifying supremacist ideology and practices. Now, much that I'm going to say now is very redundant. And if you've been listening to all my videos, you will know what I mean by I'm saying redundant, because a lot of it I've repeated over and over and over again, because it's important, right? Because it exemplifies so much about the truth that is reincarnation and its fact, and the fact that it is providence, and it was meant to be. It was written long ago in the Akashic records. And for this period, this great period of awakening, and I'm not talking about the awakening with the evangelicals awakening. No, I explain the awakening through the eyes of the soul about which we are speaking. It's very different. This period. So, let us begin. So there'll be a lot of redundancy, but also a lot of new things. Now, we see, okay, and we have seen and hear the ease and fluency with which different members of the Israeli government repeat, sometimes verbatim, the racist, dehumanizing language of Nazis, such as Heinrich Himmler, use the propaganda tactics of, among other, and actions of the Nazis in Leningrad, the Romans in Carthage, and the Germans in Namibia. We are not supposed to mention Nazis here, right? Because they've weaponized all of that, the state of Israel, to get away with genocide. We're not supposed to mention Nazis here. But if we're going to move forward, we must call a spade a spade. If we do not want to be compared to Nazis, we should not use their exact playbook. But then all supremacists use the same playbook. Use their language verbatim, employ the propaganda tactics of their spin doctor and propagandists, and employ the tactics and strategies of their armed forces or Wehrmacht. The ease and speed with which the language and tactics are used suggests part of a playbook written before October 7th, 2023. And we've seen that because out of the horse's mouth, I've told you, repeated what their playbook was. The Zionists, what their playbook was, their intentions in the state of Palestine. Nazis were supremacists, and it was even that playbook. A lot of it was even before the Nazis. So imagine that. So they're not really following the Nazi playbook. They're just following the general playbook. And actually, they could teach the Nazis a few things. Now, the Nazis were supremacists, no different from all other supremacists throughout history. Many Zionist policies predate Nazi Germany. Supremacist ideology and practices follow the same playbook, only the details are different. Mr. Netanyahu and his ilk have done a masterful job of doing just that. He has weaponized the suffering and persecution of Jews down through the ages, including in the Christian Roman Empire, in ancient Egypt, England, especially during the 12th and 13th century England, culminating in 1290 with their expulsion for 376 years, the Spanish Inquisition, and the genocide of 6 million Jews in World War II. Mr. Netanyahu and his followers have weaponized this history, and especially the genocide of 6 million Jews during World War II, to create new victims, confound Judaism with Zionism, Jew with Zionists, recreate history in their image, to coerce atonement through silent acquiescence to further inhumanity, to bully, to oppress, to silence the truth tellers, to be lawless, to be inhumane, to project abuser onto victim and victim onto abuser, to keep their boots on the neck of the victim while crying wolf, to force compliance with their lawless, inhumane acts, copyright, and monopolize suffering and victimhood, and to patent brutality, violence, cruelty, and persecution. Mr. Netanyahu and his followers have weaponized history to repeat tenfold the crimes of history without critics, to commit atrocities in the glaring sun of broad daylight. Indeed, Mr. Netanyahu and his followers have weaponized the genocide of 6 million Jews in World War II to escape accountability and to cover their tracks as they commit genocide brazenly, unabashedly, live and in front of the world. Mr. Netanyahu and his followers have weaponized history to repeat history. We should forgive, but not forget. Now, this state of Israel's vampire that says started out as revenge on October 7th, whose bloodlust is a bottomless pit, is one that the world has never encountered, for it seems to have enlisted more psychopathic and sadistic energies than are normally attracted to this vampire. Most of these energies are present and were perhaps deliberately designated for Gaza. The government of Israel and its defense forces have used every possible method of violence and cruelty employed down through the ages, many of which, in the aftermath of World Wars I and II, collective humanity had decided should not be used, consequently creating many, be they toothless, laws after the mustard and chlorine gases and other horrors that elicited poems such as Owen's 1919 poem, Dulce decorum est pro patria more, in the trenches of World War I and the genocides during World War II. And genocides, I put there, of Jews, and 75 to 85% of the Roma Sinti in Europe. They have used the methods of Rome and the siege and burning of Carthage, the German general Lothar von Trotha, human fox hunt, human bird shoots, poisoning of the water holes, and privation of the Herero and Namaqua in 1904, and the Nazi siege of Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg, the most horrific of sieges in numbers alone. That was in Leningrad, that claimed between 800,000 to 1.5 million lives. And like von Trotta and others, Israel has used Gaza and the West Bank as a laboratory and its people as lab rats and guinea pigs. In the case of Israel, for its weapons of destruction, including AI and the technology of subjugation and methods of annihilation. Considered to be in contravention of the Geneva Convention, Israel has routinely used the double tap strike strategy in its war on Gaza. This strategy involves two strikes in succession on the same target to inflict maximum damage and deaths. The first one, usually carried out by bombs and missiles, is followed by the second strike, which is deliberately timed minutes later to kill make unalive the first responders, medical personnel, or others who respond, and any survivors from the first strike. So it's just like in Manab in Iran, when the U.S. struck the school with the little girls, over 160 of them, and when the parents and others rushed They struck those who were coming to help the little children. The double tap strike is similar to the deliberate making unalive, in other words, murder, of survivors from a shipwreck or a boat that just torpedoed, bombed, deliberately sunk, or destroyed. This was the case of the Greek steamer. This is in the Nazis now in World War II. Peleus rather, in 1944 in the South Atlantic, under the orders of Captain Eck of the German U-boat. And by the way, I was 17 years old in 1943 on a supply ship going between America and Great Britain, and a German U-boat sank that ship. I reincarnated 17 years later in 1960. That's one of my past lives. I hate wars with a passion. Now, under the orders of Captain Eck of the German U-boat U-852, Captain Eck ordered his crew to, and this is a quote, so I'll say the word, to kill all the survivors. Fortunately, 3 men from the Peleus survived the second attack. Unfortunately for Captain Eck and 4 others, the 3 survivors lived to testify against them at their trial for war crimes in 1945. Everyone will eventually be held responsible for their crimes. Now, 3 of those who were held responsible, including Captain Eck, were executed, and the other 2 received prison sentences, one of them 15 years and the other life. Now, there are references to everything I'm saying here, and those references are in my books. You can see those in my books listed below, Thoughts on the Past, Volumes 1 and Volume 2. I should say Volumes 1 and 2. There are too many for me to list below, too many references. Those books actually contain about 200 or 300 pages of references. So it's quite a bit of pages, quite a bit of references to list. Now, the United States has also employed the double tap strike strategy in its wars on terror, including its strikes in Yemen. Remember those little children in Yemen? Remember them? Yeah. One of the poorest, if actually Yemen is the poorest country in the Middle East. And all of that, they were the poorest, before war began on them and sieges. So just imagine the horror show. Now, the United States, as I said, has employed the double tap strike strategy in its wars on terror, including, they're the terrorists, including its strikes in Yemen, Syria, other countries in the Middle East, and Pakistan. The double tap is a modus operandi of the IDF, as we witnessed with its acts of terrorism in the pager and cell phone explosions in Lebanon, which killed 32 and wounding at least 3,000 among the deaths and injuries, medical personnel in hospital, civilians in supermarkets, and little children. And that pager event, I also got the vision, duly memorized, um, as well as the assassination and the exact details of where Netanyahu would be and when he would do it, which was after his speech. I got those messages 1 week before it occurred, memorialized, and you can find them in my recordings, my books as well. Now, it is used, the United States used a third, or should I say Israel rather, used a third top strategy. But remember, with the USS Liberty, the United States ship, Navy ship, they used a multi-tap, tap, 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 tap. It went on for hours on their best friend and ally. Well, Israel used a third tap strategy at the Nasser hospital in the southern Gaza Strip on August 26, 2025, making unalive multiple journalists, medical personnel, first responders, and civilians. On June 8th, 1967, the Israeli Defense Forces, just as I said, used the same multiple strike strategy and attacked the ship of their greatest friend and ally, the USS Liberty, a United States Navy technical research ship, resulting in the deaths of 34 Americans, including civilians, and 170 injured. U.S. and it deliberately attacked, I was going to quote the reference here, it deliberately attacked the ship, because this is from my book, attacked the ship not once, not twice, not thrice, but again and again and again and on and on. It attacked those who tried to help those in need. I tell you, the 1967 incident was not the first time that this strategy was employed. In an incident known as the Sergeant's Affair, this is with Israel now, they've been doing this from forever, known as the Sergeant's Affair, that angered the British and caused anti-Jewish riots in England. Those were the last anti-Jewish riots, by the way, in England. In 1947, before the creation of the State of Israel, the Zionist paramilitary group Aryan, then labeled a terrorist group, kidnapped 2 British non-commissioned officers in the British Military Intelligence Corps in British Mandate Palestine. They sought the commutation of death sentences passed on 3 of their Aryan members. The British did not accede to Aryan's demands. Consequently, the 2 soldiers were killed, and then they booby-trapped their bodies and left the bodies hanging in a eucalyptus grove. The ground underneath the bodies were mined, and the British officer was injured when they cut down the booby-trapped bodies. Menachem Begin, a former Prime Minister of Israel, was one of the leaders of Aryan. And he also led some of the, we call them Trail of Tears, some of the worst massacres in Palestine. One where they just shot the Palestinian women, children, men in their backs, summary executions, and then they just flung them as if they were garbage into a whole. Read my book. It gives a whole listing of all the massacres that they committed in Palestine before and after the Nakba. Now, Menachem Begin, a former prime minister of Israel, was one of the leaders of Irgun, the paramilitary group that was responsible for the 1948 Deir Yassin massacre that I was talking about, which was an orgy of rape, mutilation, summary execution of at least 100 Palestinian civilians, including the elderly, children, and women. The horror of this massacre and the resulting fear played an important role in sending Palestinians in droves from their homes, lands, villages, and towns, and Palestine. And then you had the Nakba. And if you'll recall, when we did Out of the Horse's Mouth, where I had Zionists tell us who they are, what their goals are and were and still are. And one of it was they were going to rule by terror because they had to get rid of the Palestinians. So Israel is a state founded on, by, and with terror. The sights, the sounds, and the actions of the government of Israel and its army, with the complicity and active participation of the United States by its weapons, its game at the UN, especially with that this is during the Biden administration, Linda Thomas Greenfield, or Greenfield Thomas, that black lady, suffering does not ennoble. Playing her games, dotting her I's, calling for crossing T's that have been, I's and T's that have been dotted and crossed, that we lost count how many times, while children and babies were dying. With its weapons, games at the UN, its confirmation of lies, Anthony Blinken, he will be held to account in this lifetime. To back up unlawful, vile, horrific actions such as the destruction of hospitals are indeed the face of pure wickedness. Most people would say pure evil. I say wickedness because for me, when we say evil, that gives people a get out of jail free card, because they say, well, evil, well, maybe some demon or devil possessed them and made them evil. Well, I'm not into that nonsense. So I say pure wickedness, fully conscious of what you're doing. Pure, unadulterated wickedness. And I know there's a bit of redundancy there with pure unadulterated. Recall that we use wicked, as I said. I should just keep reading, instead of evil, because the latter might lead to the excuse that something else is the cause of our actions. And we must call it for what it is, for wickedness is equal opportunity. No matter the mask, we are all, or have been, guilty of wickedness at some point in the journey of our soul. No one or no group has a copyright to suffering. No one or no group has a patent for gratuitous violence, wanton destruction, cruelty, or representing the face of pure wickedness. No one or no group should be given the copyright to suffering and victimhood, or the patent for pure wickedness. No one or no group should be given the green light to perpetrate on another group the crimes of history in any degree, that were perpetrated on them. The state of Israel should not be permitted by the consortium of great powers to repeat the crimes in any degree perpetrated on Jews by the Nazis. Neither should anyone be under the illusion that the state of Israel cannot be committing genocide because 6 million Jews were victims of genocide, just as one should not be under any illusion that a former slave, and there have been slaves of different races, color, religion, and other masks throughout history, would not enslave another. I cite a lot of examples in my book, and our next series of videos will be on slavery throughout the ages, throughout the world. This occurred in the Caribbean. We should not permit anyone or any group to weaponize history to bully us, to silence and coerce us into silent acquiescence to horrific acts against any other group. We are all brothers in this brotherhood of man, each one of us a part of humanity. Never again must mean never again for everyone. Never again must be equal opportunity if this brotherhood that is man is to truly become civilized, so that we can all live in peace, love, and security, and terminate never again moments that keeps repeating too frequently. Never again, yet again, always again. As previously mentioned, the state of Israel has inculcated the dehumanization of Palestinians in their population for almost a century. We have seen the atrocities that they have perpetrated on fellow human beings, all brothers in this brotherhood of man. We have seen the arrogance with which, that they can have hunting fields, slaughtering zones for Palestinians. They snipe Palestinians as if they are picking off birds, as von Trotta and his human fox hunt and bird shoots of the Namakwa and Herero peoples in Namibia. They displace the people in Gaza, driving them from place to place as if they're herding cattle, culling, starving, dehydrating them, visiting disease upon them to thin out the herd, to achieve the 15% to 20% magical number as espoused straight from the horse's mouth, who will serve as waiters and other positions of servitude to their Zionist masters. This is what is being done while the world sits idly by. And I will say here, the state of Israel, they actually plan this, have stuff like this written down, calculate, just as Reinhard Heydrich did with Himmler when they planned the Holocaust. As I will show later, how many Jews were there, how many elderly, and the elderly, those who could not work, well, you'd get rid of this amount, so that's X percentage, and then you'd have how many millions, well, you'd work them, keep working them until you work to death. This is what they do in Israel. It's like how they calculated the calories necessary to keep Palestinians just on the edge, so that they don't they don't fall over into the line of starvation, because Westerners, they're a little too queasy to see babies starving and hungry. But after October 7th, well, they kind of just they had an excuse to throw even that, that semblance, 1900 calories. I think I've mentioned this before. These are the things that they do, just like the Nazis, because they are reincarnated Nazis. That's what they do. Same calculations, just like the Nazis. They're just doing what they did in World War II, because a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them are reincarnated Nazis, and this was their chance to seize the reins of power for a long, long time. This is what is being done while the world, as I said, sits idly by. All these over-the-top atrocities also aim to desensitize us in their arrogance and to bring the world down to their depraved level of wild beasts. They have tried to desensitize the world to their collective depravity with the final insult to humanity, believing that $150 million to be allocated to public relations activities and using their influencers will sanitize their image and actions. We must not forget that in the midst of disease, starvation, thirst, or dehydration, more like it, lack of fuel, clothing, and water, the IDF, that's what they had in Gaza, has provided spas and retreats for their soldiers where they are fed steak, latte, and the like, so they can continue their slaughter in the slaughterhouse that Gaza has become. That's what was going on. Remember, I wrote this back in 2024, 2025. Just this, that the spas that they were providing for their soldiers and steak, while just outside the gates there, babies were starving and they were slaughtering innocent civilians and medics, bombing hospitals and locking elderly people, women and children in their homes, people with special needs, and then lighting the homes afire, sending the dogs in to feed upon the living and the dead. This is so eerily reminiscent, so reminiscent of the Nazi commandant of Auschwitz-Birkenau, Rudolf Höss, and his family, including his wife and 5 children, who lived in a house with a garden in full view of the concentration camp. The children, while playing in the garden, could watch the prisoners work just outside the camp of horrors. They carried on with their very normal lives, and when we dehumanize our brothers in this brotherhood of man, we are able to do what this Nazi commandant Rudolf Höss did. He would oversee the gassing and burning of perhaps thousands every single day, and then he would return home just across the road, so to speak, each day to play with his children, right? And enjoy meals with nary an ounce of remorse or shame. Life continues uninterrupted. And so you see Nazi Germany repeating because they're reincarnated Nazis operating. So here they are recreating the spas and, ordinary life while just in your sight. Just like this Nazi commandant, his house was right there. His children could see the people in the camp outside. And he would return home after all the gassing and burning of thousands of people. He'd just return and play with his kids, and they'd have dinner, go upstairs and go to sleep. Think about that. It was just another ordinary day for Rudolf Höss. Approximately 1.5 million Jewish children, tens of thousands of Romani children, 5,000 to 7,000 German children with disabilities, and many other children of different nationalities were exterminated by the Nazis. Newborns were slaughtered in hospitals and other institutions. Older children were slaughtered in what they called killing centers. That's a name. Or shot in mass shootings. This has been or still is the modus operandi of the Israeli Defense Forces in Gaza, where children have been deliberately targeted by snipers and shot in their heads and chests, surveilled by drones and then bombed even while playing, newborns taken from their mothers and left to rot on hospital beds, covered in shrapnel, broken glass, collapse, bulldozer-induced collapse ceilings, metal. During World War II, in the ghettos, the prisoners, including children, were denied adequate shelter, clothing, food, and medicine. In Gaza, children have perished and are dying from starvation, disease, hypothermia, due to a lack of adequate shelter and clothing, as Israel has laid complete siege to Gaza for more than 60 days with no food. And remember, this is sort of dated from 2024. Water, fuel, or medicine has entered for more than 60 days at that time. The inhabitants are under bombardment 24 hours, 7 days per week, shelling, bombing, sniping, and drone attacks. They never received the shelters they were promised in the ceasefire deal. Remember, they never honor contracts, but they expect others to, because they're kings, they're the supremacists. Others don't count. They feel like gods. They're the gods on earth right now. Surprise is coming for them. Gazans were still slaughtered daily. Israel, true to the supremacist ideology and practices, is dishonorable, duplicitous, and not to be trusted. Remember, that's what their founder, one of the fathers of Israel, said. Ben Gurion, their first president, or prime minister rather, said that he would never trust an Israeli. He'd never sign any agreement with them if he were a Palestinian. So think about that. Why target the children? In Himmler's words, "For I did not consider myself justified in exterminating the men." In other words, and this is a quote, so I'll read the quote, killing them or having them killed, and then allowing their children to grow up to wreak vengeance on our children and grandchildren. The difficult decision had to be taken to make these people disappear from the face of the earth. For the organization that had to carry out this duty, it was the most difficult that we have ever had to undertake. So even Himmler, for him it was a difficult decision, right? But not for Israel. It's easy for them. So that's another thing that shows that they're worse than the Nazis. The Nazis targeted the children. But he said it was a difficult decision. You never hear an Israeli saying that it's a difficult decision. They say they're snakes and they should make them unalive. They have no regret. It's not difficult for them. Think about that. That's something to digest. And we see the psychopathic and sadistic energies that we're dealing with. Oh, it's stubborn indeed. This is in line with the orders given by Benjamin Netanyahu to the IDF when he instructed in his instructions to the army to destroy all that belongs to them. Of course, he doesn't believe in all of this stuff, about Amalekites and all that. No, he doesn't. He doesn't believe in all this, and he believes in greater Israel because then he'll be emperor. But he doesn't believe in all the biblical nonsense and chosen people. He doesn't believe all that stuff. He just wants power. So he plays along. He's a non-believer. Children have always been targets, and we've covered that, and I've known that from the beginning. And well, the UN came out with their report a couple weeks ago. Yeah, children were the targets with the Israelis. They're the targets for the Zionists. Children ensure from the horse's mouth with Ariel Sharon. They said it. This was evident. Children ensure the continuation of a people. This is the idea. It's not a secret. Look at the games of shooting young men and teenage boys. Shooting them on their genitals. Imprison them and attack their genitals. My God. When it dawns on the generation to come, how will their descendants, how will the descendants of these Zionists face the atrocities that their ancestors, even though I don't believe in their ancestral ties through the eyes of the soul, how will they face or understand the atrocities that they're committing, that the Israelis are committing right now? To the eyes of the soul, each man is responsible for the well-being of his soul and his own actions. So it is so vital we know the truth that is reincarnation and its facts, because the generations to come shouldn't have to worry about that because they didn't commit those actions. All they should know is take heed and do better. This is going to be the only way the children, grandchildren, and others will be able not to hang their head in shame and be laden with the guilt that will be worse than Nazi Germany. The trauma of perpetrators that they cause. They must learn not to repeat and to know that ancestors is a fallacy through the eyes of the soul and only valid through the temporal lens. So the only way they can get over this trauma of knowing, oh my God, my ancestors did this. It's like people who had relatives who were slave owners and they don't want anyone to know that their relatives, their ancestors were slave owners. Well, You weren't the slave owner. And children of ancestors who were former slaves shouldn't be blaming, like, give me a break. You're not responsible for somebody else's actions, right? So this is what they will have to learn, right? So through the eyes of the soul, this trauma, right? So this is part of ancestral trauma. And through the eyes of the soul, if you understand the truth that is reincarnation and its many facts, you will know, number one, ancestral ties is a fallacy. And number two, each man is responsible for the consequences of his own actions. And so the sins of the father, right, is not applicable, because you should not have to pay for the sins of your father. Now, as a collective, for example, when we destroy the earth or do something to make some whatever, like climate change, for example, well, collectively we will all suffer, right? Collectively, including those who did whatever they did to the climate, because they must come back to this earth. They will be born again. And so they will also experience the harm that they have caused. They will feel the side effects of it, right? So so we see how knowing the truth that is reincarnation, how it can help us in this instance to release us from the guilt and the burden that we might believe we should be carrying. Only thing it should do is to tell us that we need to do better and we should not repeat the same mistakes. The Israeli army has over the decades committed or facilitated massacres of Palestinians, such as Kibia, 1953, Sabra Shatila, 1982. The cruelty Mr. Netanyahu and his government and army have displayed in Gaza stands apart and has had few rivals in recent decades. The speed with which they have slaughtered and injured tens upon tens of thousands, we could say hundreds of thousands now, of Palestinian civilians, almost one half of them children, or they say a third. Not even one should suffer. Displaced, the speed at which they have also displaced 1.5 million people and destroyed Gaza has no rival. They now hold that notorious and dubious honor, one that no entity should want. What is happening in Gaza will dim the lights on the Holocaust as the older generations die. What will be seared in the memory of the younger generation will be what they are now witnessing in Gaza. What is happening in Sudan is another horror show that is now using the Israeli template of bombing hospitals, etc. But it is Gaza that will take center stage because of who the perpetrator is and the accomplices, and because it is being done live and direct in the glaring sun of broad daylight in front of the whole world. Note, the Israeli targeting of children and babies is on another level from the Nazis. It has no rival. Himmler, whether he is to be believed or not at heart, said that it was a difficult, as I said before, undertaking to slaughter the children, but that it had to be done because they would grow and never forget and seek vengeance. Israel and its defense forces cannot even rise to the level of this very low bar of reasoning. Clearly, absolute bottom, absolute depths of the abyss of moral bankruptcy. History teaches us that supremacist ideology and practices are aided and abetted by enablers, and often the acquiescence, silent and implicit or explicit, of the majority of the population and also the great powers. So, as we've discussed many times, more than 82% of the Israeli Zionists, Jews, because in Israel they have about maybe 15%, 20% Arabs, or Palestinians, I should say. So the lot of the Zionist Israeli, the Jews, Zionist Jews, they're enablers. They agree with all that's going on, all this atrocity, moral bankruptcy. And of course, they're enabled by the great powers such as the West, the collective West. When we see injustice, we should say something. Speak up, for we are brothers in this brotherhood of man. We are our brother's keeper. That which I do unto myself, that which I do unto my brother, rather, I do unto myself. The justice of the universe is without favor or fear. It is not selective, dependent on who the perpetrator or victim is. We must never condone injustice because it is happening to others or to the others and them. If we do not speak up or do something, one day it will be our turn. And then there will be no one to speak up for us. The proverb here is, every puss at them 4 o'clock. Every cat has its 4 o'clock. Each one of us has his day of reckoning. Today for me, tomorrow for you. Today for me, tomorrow for you. What is happening to me will happen to you tomorrow. Today will happen to you tomorrow. So do not rejoice at my misfortune. Misfortune awaits all of us. On earth, a rocky back. The earth rocks back and forth. You will eventually get your turn. Compromise politicians and others in power also enable supremacist ideology and practices because of their corruption. Supremacists are able to reach the never again moments because of enablers. There are two types of enablers. There are those who kneel to the bully and those who assist. Those who assist include the population. In the first instance, in the case of the Third Reich, that's Nazi Germany, he was the bully to whom no one cared to stand up. Instead, the enablers, the rest of Europe, as usual, they're weak, very weak, mealy-mouthed, yellow-belly cowards, they would say, in the old Western movies. The rest of Europe and Britain, well, the sycophant, the mother or the parent that has now become the sycophant, preferred to stand up during World War II. Sorry. The Third Reich, sorry, I should just keep reading. The Third Reich, was the bully. No one cared to stand up. Instead, the enablers, the rest of Europe and Britain, preferred to appease him, and that was with Chamberlain at first. Preferred to appease him because they were not the ones being bullied. It was Poland and Czechoslovakia being bullied. He was abusing someone else, so they, express outrage. And they knew from beginning, they saw when he was, before he even started invading, they saw them not adhering to the Treaty of Versailles, just like Israel. All the ceasefires and whatever, they don't adhere, and nobody does anything about it, right? The people who make it, nobody does anything. They do not what would I say? Put it into pride, hold. There should be a mechanism to make sure that you're not violating that. But they don't. So it was the same thing with the Treaty of Versailles. As he was building up when he shouldn't have been building up, with the army getting this and that, they just let it go. However, he was abusing somebody else and not them. So, like just words, oh my, oh, you shouldn't do that, but you're not doing anything about it. Here, history teaches us that when we see injustice, we must not just idly stand by. We must say and do something because it will eventually consume us. When we deal with bullies, we must stop them from the beginning and use the stick, not the carrot. You don't use carrot with bullies. And you don't compromise with bullies because they're the only ones who benefit. If we do not, we will eventually have to do what we were trying to avoid. And by the way, when we indulge bullies and people committing incorrect actions, that is a spiritual mistake. If we do not, we eventually have to do what we were trying to avoid. However, which is you're trying to avoid war, so you give the bully, compromise with the bully, and he'll just keep asking for more. So from the get-go, they would say, punch him in the nose. I'm not for violence, but as a matter of speaking, it will take more energy and resources and lives to remedy the situation. So do it from the get-go and let that bully understand. Go no further. Sometimes when we allow the bully to keep going, the damage is irreversible and we never recover. In 1936, the Nazis, in contravention of the Treaty of Versailles, resulting from its loss in World War I, and militarized. What they did was they militarized the Rhineland. The Allies saw that, but they did nothing. 1938, it annexed Austria. The Allies did nothing. Sounds like Israel? As Hitler went, cast his sights on Czechoslovakia, first with his excuse of the 3 million ethnic Germans. Remember we were talking about that? Like you sprinkle a little salt or a little pepper in a head that is mostly gray and gives you an excuse that you're going in to protect them. With his excuse of 3 million ethnic Germans in Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, and despite being given this territory, and so they gave him that territory, and most of its steel, iron, electrical power, and coal, which of course provided Germany with what was necessary to facilitate further conquest because he could make his military, his weaponry, and what have you, and you're giving him some source of fuel. In the 1938 Munich Pact, they gave him Sudetenland and all of that stuff. It was not enough. He invaded, on top of that, Czechoslovakia in 1939, and still the Allies did nothing. As previously mentioned, supremacist ideology and practices know nothing of honor and can never be trusted. We see this with Netanyahu and the Israeli government. They never respect contracts and treaties. They're not honorable men, but miscreant souls that they are through the temporal lens are brigands and scoundrels. Hitler received most of what Czechoslovakia had, but wanted more. Seeing how easily he could have what he wanted, he got an inch, so he decided to take a mile. That was easy. So he desired 3 miles and went into Poland, and then the Allies reacted, but alas, he had a big head start. He had in Czechoslovakia and Austria, in addition to his militarization of the Rhineland, enough resources and time to strengthen his military machine. A machine that had become a well-oiled one. It would take much more to catch that horse that had gotten out of the barn, if at all. If you could catch him. He had such a big head start. The Third Reich scenario is now being repeated by Israel. In keeping in line with its expansionist policy that keeps grabbing buffer zones to protect buffer zones, as it is now doing in Gaza. And now it's the yellow line, right? It keeps moving the yellow line back. So I guess it's going to push the Palestinians out into the sea where they'll drown. To protect, now it is doing the same thing in Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, and the West Bank with American complicity. And that was from in the Biden administration. Doesn't matter whether it's Democratic or Republican, same thing when it comes to Israel. I've never seen such an absurdity. However, but compromise, right? Corrupt politicians. However, Israel has never hidden its intentions of empire building. On the cheap, you use American resources, their money, American blood, as they did in Iraq. Sacrifice American lives. So that's really getting it on the cheap. You know, build your empire on the cheap without any sacrifice. We should read the words of its founders quoted earlier. It does not hide its intentions now, as is evidenced by the map shown at the United Nations General Assembly in September 2023 by Netanyahu. According to his map and his speech, none of these Middle Eastern countries, he says, are sovereign states. Telegraphing his plan with American complicity that he aims to foment strife, destroy every state with American bombs and other weapons whenever he wishes at will, steal as much of their lands as possible, balkanize them, rendering them into small petty states with warring factions, pliant to Israel and America, giving Israel free rein to bomb and cull their population whenever it chooses, and thin out the herds to manageable sizes that it can manage. Benjamin Netanyahu has followed the identical Hitlerian steps with no one to stop him. However, the Zionist playbook predates the Third Reich. In Netanyahu's case, the Allies agree with his actions. And the unfortunate, the weak, are at the mercy of the strong. Most of the world are with the weak as they witness the injustices and atrocities, but they are too weak. They too are weak and powerless. We will explain why this is so at this time. However, justice shall prevail. The Hitlerian playbook, like the Zionist playbook, is the same. Recall that all supremacist ideology and practices have the same playbook with the mask providing the specific details. As previously mentioned, Europe and Britain knelt to the bully that was Nazi Germany. In the case of Israel, the Europeans and Britain, feeling that they have to atone for what they see as past transgressions, especially for the Holocaust carried out by the Nazis, kneel to the bully, but they also do it because they're supremacists as well. And they don't care about those brown people or those Muslims. So, and of course, we know they're Christians, and we know that they aren't all Arabs and they aren't all brown and all of this nonsense, but they're just supremacists. In their atonement and destructive guilt, they have allowed Israel and their Zionist supporters to usurp their free will and shut out the light of their conscience. And of course, there's compromise. And in so doing, are complicit in the slaughter, suffering, deliberate man-made disasters of famine and disease to ravage a population comprised of mostly children, because half of the population in Gaza are children, and to continue to rampage across Western Asia. Of course, as discussed, there is the bonus with them of punishing Iran, the Europeans, and the Americans, and perhaps another source of oil. Now remember, I wrote this back in 2024. That could fall under the control of the West. Well, the whore of Babylon, he has a cloaca mouth, so he has diarrhea of the mouth. So he usually says exactly what they want to do, which is we'll control the oil. And some of those men in their 80s that you see on Fox News talking about, yes, and yes, we'll seize the oil, seize Cork Island, and we can all become oil barons. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. Oil barons, right? 82 and in late 70s, early 80s, or maybe even older, you want to become oil barons with somebody else's oil, really. Now, of course, as discussed, there is the bonus with them of punishing Iran, as I said, and perhaps another source of oil that could fall under the control of the West. Europe and Britain continue to be the dawdlers who run around wringing their hands, trying to decide how much water they need to put out the fire, while the fire continues to burn out of control, spreading to every room in the house, including the one in which they find themselves while they're still deciding what they're gonna do. Then there are the weak Muslim and Arab states, some too selfish and not realize it is in their interest to stop the bully. Now, my guide, Umar ibn al-Khattab, in other videos, he has spoken And he has said what he has to say. But the hopeful thing is there shall arise an energy of Saladin. And that energy of Saladin is a uniter. Because right now, there's a lot to be desired from these Muslim states. Then, as I said, they're the weak Muslim and Arab states, some too selfish and not realizing it is in their interest to stop the bully because they're on the chopping block, every last one of them. Some of them have the leverage to do so, or did have the leverage. We're not ignorant of geopolitics now, that's what, when you have people like me speaking or whatever, the people with their PhDs and whatever, they'll say, oh, those people, those common people, they sit there and they don't understand geopolitics. It's all geopolitics. They play games. They're game players. Politicians, they're all game players. Some of them, as I said, have the leverage to do so. Divide and conquer will be a successful Zionist strategy until the Muslim and Arab states learn the lessons from history and the Saladin energy arises to bring unity. They must learn to put aside their selfish interests. If not, they risk servitude. Well, none is exempt. History teaches us that divide and conquer only works until enemies realize that it is in their best interest to unite against a common foe. And it's usually especially so in West Asia. My God, over the years, the decades, the millennia, that is one, your friend is my enemy, my friend is my enemy, and all that masha, right? All that mashallah. It is a fight against all Muslims. As Mr. Netanyahu said to the cheers of the Christian nationalists, far-right extremists, anti-Semites, and a host of strange bedfellows who through the eyes of the soul are of Netanyahu's ilk, souls on the lowest rungs of the ladder of soul restoration, mischievous and miserable souls lusting for power and bent on causing chaos and misery. Misery loves company, and at this time misery has much company, and Muslim and Arabs are targets. They're they're facing an existential threat, and I keep saying that. Recall the targets of Muslim and Arab for racists and supremacists who do not care for accuracy in their bigotry. Include, right? So I'm saying Arabs and Muslims. Include Christians, those of other faiths, Zoroastrians, Jews as well, Kurds, Persians, Afro-Iraqis, Egyptians, Phoenicians, Levantines, Assyrians, Yazidis, Balochis, Azeris, right? Persians, the list goes on. It's never ending. Atlantis all over again. We will reiterate here that the Muslim world also has its extremists. As previously mentioned, bullies are enablers, are enabled not only by those who kneel to the bully, but by those who assist it. Its supporters, in this case other countries, and its populations. Germany was supported by other countries, including those which formed the Axis powers. The Axis powers included Italy, Japan, and the Soviet Union that would exit when it became a victim Thief and thief, God laugh, no honor among thieves. And we discussed that already of Nazi aggression. The, the Soviet Union had signed the Nazi-Soviet Pact in 1939 with the Nazis to divide Poland. Between the Soviets and the Nazis, more than 6 million Poles, including 3 million Jews, were slaughtered. Hitler wanted it all because it was so easy. History teaches us once again that thief and thief, God laugh. The Soviet would also become victim of the Nazi quest for world domination when on June 22nd, 1941, in an operation dubbed Operation Barbarossa, Germany invaded Russia with 3 million troops. The defense and its terrain made even more potent and devastating by incompetent military commanders, ignorant of the primordial strategic importance of logistics. Richard the Lionheart, he knew the importance of logistics. Any military commander must know and prioritize logistics. When you are in military planning, especially with scenarios in mind, now the incompetence of those commanders, especially lack of logistics planning, halted the German advance. This would lead the Soviet Union, arch nemesis of the West, what Germany did, and was also arch nemesis of Germany, because you're communists, right? To change its allegiance, as we discussed in the past video, from the Axis power to the Allies. Indeed, World War II was the war of strange bedfellows. The refusal to stop the bully from the get-go cost tens of millions of lives, including the genocide of Jews and Romani and others, many others, millions of Russians and Poles, people from Czechoslovakia, Jehovah's Witness, blacks, the children, the mixed race children that they call Rhineland bastards, those special needs, homosexuals, you name it, some intellectuals, and a lot of destruction. As previously mentioned, Mr. Netanyahu and Israel have been enabled by their backers and those who kneel to the bully. When we have a child or a friend, we should never condone them in their delinquency. We should be frank and truthful, because at the end they will embarrass us. Not only will they embarrass us, they will take us down with them, because they will go down. History teaches that if we are trying to save someone and see that the person is dragging us down with the rope that we have extended to help them, we should let go of that rope and let them fall in the pit. That's all we can do. This is what is now happening. When we look at the war in Gaza, the reputation and power of America and Europe have taken a tremendous hit, along with that of Israel, because of their complicity in genocide. Well, America and Israel are wrapped in a death spiral, and we see this unfolding in front of our eyes. They have been revealed and have revealed to themselves, like the Europeans, that they are no different from those that they have judged to be standing on the low ground of their moral high ground. America and its democracy, with no small part played by Joe Biden and his ignominious, immoral, and amoral State Department, National Security Team, and Pentagon, and still ongoing, are now locked in what might be called a death spiral with the new administration as well. America has lost its hegemony, but is the last one to get the memo. It has become an elephant that is fast falling. Because of its size and power, the behemoth can still create many problems for the rest of the world while falling as it tries to assert itself a little too late. Benjamin Netanyahu and his fellow supremacists have indeed convinced themselves that they will get away with this never again moment. After all, for decades, with the help of the Western media in America, they have gotten away with so much, including flouting every international and humanitarian law. They have never been held accountable for any of so many egregious deeds committed against the people it has subjugated for almost a century, even children and babies. They have never had to pay in pecuniary terms for reparations. If they did, that would probably make them think twice. Little wonder they have convinced themselves that they're going to commit these mass-scale crimes that have been happening on a small scale over the years following the Nakba in 1948, and in some form or other, annihilation, expulsion, or the thinning out of the herd of the human animals, as they have designated the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank, in the glaring sun of broad daylight in front of the world, and with the very active complicity of the most powerful country in the world and other powerful players, some of whom have provided both weapons and or excuses that they will get away with it. And they very well might, for they're almost there. Once again, none of the atrocities that include attacks on hospitals, that have left babies to die and rot on hospital beds, covered in shrapnel, collapsed ceilings, spent shells, and shattered glass, have even shaken the conscience of the leaders of these countries. Neither have the emaciated children dying of man-made starvation, children drinking from puddles contaminated with raw sewage and bacteria from corpses of civilians slaughtered by the Israeli army with the weapons provided by America. America covers for Israel as it violates every international law and humanitarian law. By enabling Israel to cross every red line, America uses the state of Israel to carry out an agenda against its enemies using all means and force, even those banned by American law. So here you see, it profits America when Israel does that, because then it goes behind and it uses Israel as its agent. So they don't have to be accountable to their own laws. So, right, they're benefiting as well when Israel goes around and breaks every single law. No, they're actually doing it under this new regime themselves and don't care. Now, America covers the genocidal and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians and usurpation of Palestinian lands, declaring sanctions and travel bans that are only for show, for they are not enforced, yet flouting its own laws and its Secretary of State, and this was about Anthony Blinken, the pretend fireman and true arsonist who travels with a gas can behind his back and the empty water hose that has never been attached to a fire hydrant, ignoring the reports of its own experts to supply weapons to mutilate children and behead babies, lie to Congress. He should be held to account for that. Real Palestinian babies were beheaded by American bombs in Al-Mawasi camp, tent city, I should say, and not the propaganda of 40 beheaded babies that never were, propagated by the Israeli government and members of the Biden administration. No children or babies should have been hurt in October 7th. Rampage of Hamas and other fighters. War is never to be waged on children, no matter who you are. Another innocence. This arsonist, that is Anthony Blinken, brings despair to the Middle East because his trips usually signal some big atrocity or major illegal terrorist act and massacre that Israel is about to commit. He bandies some new peace deal. And you have to go back in the records and you'll see what I'm saying is true. Measure up when he's going and the peace deals and all of this stuff, and you'll see the dates. Check the dates. He bandies some new peace deal that acts as a carrot. Where am I here? Sorry about that. He bandies some new peace deal that acts as a carrot while he allows Israel to wield the stick against the innocent Palestinians, especially children, with the message that more will come if you do not sign. The massacres are the tools to extract the deal, and he spreads the propaganda, gaslighting the world that it is Hamas who will not agree or is preventing the deal, when we all see clearly and know that it is Benjamin Netanyahu by his statements. But perhaps the most important enabler of the bully supremacist ideology and practices is the population. The population is comprised mostly of the common man, not a monolith, that we often choose to treat in any society in a paternalistic way or infantilize, actively and in silent acquiescence, aided and abetted the leaders, government, in their persecution of the despised, the undesirable, or in this century, the others, those targeted as the boogeyman for one reason or another. The boogeyman might be the majority indigenous population without power, or a minority. The common man report neighbors and do not hesitate to steal their neighbors' possessions. But there will always be some amongst the common man in smaller numbers that will speak up or help the persecuted escape. For example, by hiding them or helping them escape, as we know happened in Nazi Germany and Nazi-occupied Europe during the Rwandan genocide, when Hutus provided safe haven for Tutsis and Hindus who hid Muslims in their home during the 1948 Hyderabad massacre that claimed the lives of at least 200,000 defenseless Muslims. These are the souls who have come to expiate, advance, and restore their soul, numbering among them rescue souls. During the Von Sass purge, and genocide of the Circassians in the Caucasus. It was the common man in the form of Cossack women who were charged with decapitating captured or killed Circassians or unalived, slaughtered Circassians, preparing the heads before they were displayed on poles as a warning and intimidation. During the pogrom, purge of the kulaks, it was their neighbors, the common man, who reported them, stripped the kulaks of their clothes, beat and paraded them in the streets, and shared their possessions. It was the common man who lynched a group of Italians in New Orleans in what was the largest mass lynching in America, shooting them with over 200 bullets, tearing them apart limb by limb, hanging them, and taking pieces of their remains home. It was the common man who slaughtered the DeWitt brothers in Europe, mutilated them, and then ate their remains. These examples I discuss in my book in more details. There are those who vociferously and actively enable, or those who do so in their silence, acquiesce, some burying their heads in the sand and pretending that all is well. The Nazis could not have succeeded without the support of the German population. There was great suffering in Germany after the country's loss in World War I. Much of that loss they blamed on the loss in the propaganda department. The punitive measures taken were harsh. The collective mental depression was felt to be so great that mood enhancers were sold in the supermarkets. That's not conspiracy. Those are facts. You could get mood enhancers in the supermarkets. That's how the collective depression in Germany after World War I, that's how bad it was. The population was ready then, right after they lost in World War I. They were the aggressors. They lost, and so they were punished after they lost. And it was so great, the depression, the economic hurdles. The economy was really bad. And I discussed that in in my book, like, how much it was for a loaf of bread. I can't remember now, but it's like in the space of months, the German mark had depreciated. Like it was like, it went down. You needed it's sort of like millions of marks to buy a loaf of bread. And so the population then was ready for a boogeyman. And Jews provided the scapegoat, as they always have. As a minority in Europe, the Jews have always been the boogeyman, especially during and after the Crusades. It was during this time that blood libel, which I discussed before, took root. In addition to Jews, Roma, Sinti, black people, mulattoes, or mixed race. In Germany, they called them the Rhineland bastards. Communists, the disabled, Jehovah's Witnesses, certain intellectuals, and homosexuals were other scapegoats and boogeymen. Indeed, scapegoats and boogeymen were plenty in Nazi Germany. There is no doubt that the German population supported and enabled the Third Reich and participated in the atrocities that were committed. There's no question about this fact. Through the temporal lens, the views on and explanations as to why and how they could have done so are many. Through the spiritual lens, there's only one view, as seen through the eyes of the soul and based on the journey and history of the soul. This view we have discussed earlier, if you remember, in our discussion of the masks and equal opportunity. The German population was not and will not be the last population to actively or in silent acquiescence perpetrate atrocities against other populations within their midst or externally. Through the temporal lens, there are many explanations or views that attempt to explain the complicity or enabling of Nazi atrocities. Dan Goldhagen argues that it was what he calls eliminationist anti-Semitism, which was, as in other societies, the ardent desire to rid German society of Jews and their religion, Judaism, by any and every mean inclusive of displacement, ethnic cleansing, and genocide propelled the Germans in their action during World War II. This extreme hatred, he argues, made Germans like Rudolf Höss, the man, with the garden next to the concentration camp there, who worked in the concentration camp and came back home, and it was just another ordinary day. Willing executioners, people like him became willing executioners who, after having committed atrocities, overseen the gassing of hundreds of people, perhaps thousands, and returned to his home on the other side of the fence from the extermination camp to play with his children and, well, have dinner. Just another ordinary day. Just another ordinary day indeed. We can replace anti-Semitism with any other mask in the term eliminationist anti-Semitism. We can replace the mask German with any other mask as well. Based on our earlier discussion of supremacist ideology and practices, we know that dehumanization spread through whatever medium of propaganda throughout the ages, and it leads to our ability or desire to engage in atrocities with nary an ounce of shame or remorse. When we dehumanize our brothers, we are able to reckon with the psychological inconsistency with which we are faced, having to explain how we can treat our fellow human being in such a manner. Even when we dehumanize them, we should not treat animals in that manner either. If you think about it, not all of us will drink the Kool-Aid and succumb to the eliminationist tendency. Once again, we know why this is so, why not all of us will do those atrocities, and why at different points in history, one mask or other, because we discussed that through the eyes of the soul, with the journey of the soul, our experience, and why different people react differently under different circumstances. Toward the eliminationist affectation through the eyes of the soul, the spiritual lens. So we know each of us are different because we've had different soul journeys. Goldhagen, his concept may be applied to the majority of the population of Israel. There is no difference. All we have to do is the mass. Only the mass have changed. Some would like to bamboozle us through their weaponization of Judaism, Jew, and the suffering and victimhood of Jews through the ages. If it walks and quacks like a duck, it is a duck. We're not entitled to our own facts. The truth stands unopposed. There are neither reasons nor excuses. What is happening in Gaza is eliminationist anti-Palestinianism. This is a part of the playbook of supremacist ideology and practices in Nazi Germany. It was eliminationist anti-Semitism. Well, in Gaza, all we have to do is the mask. It's the same thing occurring, just that the masks have changed. So it's now become eliminationist anti-Palestinianism. This is part of the playbook of supremacist ideology and practices. There's no difference, except for the fact that the Palestinians are not a minority. And they are indigenous to Palestine. The Zionist Jews entered Palestine with the goal, in their own words and deeds, straight from the horse's mouth, that we have laid out in earlier videos, to eliminate the Palestinians by any and every means, including genocide, which is now being played out in the glaring sun of broad daylight. The majority of the Israeli population see the Palestinian people as beasts on 2 feet, criminals. Even children and babies are criminals. They label them as criminals, subhuman, human animals, snakes, and the list go on. This is why they can agree to starve babies, drop 2,000-pound bombs, see babies die of hypothermia and the grape of men with dogs, or to death with rifles. A not insignificant part of the IDF is made up of a civilian reserve force. Once again, there's really little difference between the Nazis and their eliminationist anti-Semitism and the Zionists and their eliminationist anti-Palestinianism. If we are honest, for tens of decades, most Israeli Jews, Zionists and non-Zionists, have gone about their lives in silent acquiescence with the apartheid and occupation, the subjugation of a people, and the criminalization of children by its court system, continuing the draconian, inhumane policies of British Mandate of Palestine. They supported the subjugation and injustice of millions of people. For decades, the West has touted the beacon of democracy that Israel was, while knowing full well that it was an oppressor. The Western media also aided and abetted, billowing the smoke of lies, gaslighting, propaganda, and dehumanization. At this time, for almost 2 years, it is without a doubt that many, if not most, hear the thunderous, most of the Israelis living, because Israel is a tiny place. It is without a doubt that for more than 2 years, that they would hear the thunderous, deafening explosions of the 2,000-pound bombs being dropped 24/7 in that tiny, overpopulated prison that's now become, and now it's become, an extermination camp and children's graveyard. If they are deaf or wearing headphones or earplugs, then the lit-up night sky cannot escape their view. Gaza is not so far away. It's just 44 miles, 70.81 kilometers, and 48 miles, which is 77.25 kilometers from Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, respectively. Once again, history teaches us that when we see injustice, we must do something, or at least speak up and out. And this is it. If we see injustice and we can do something about it, we don't have to speak up and out. We can just do what we need to do to help matters. If all we have are our voices and our feet, well, we got to speak up and out, right? Injustice is contagious. Supremacist ideology and practices is cannibalistic. It will eventually eat its own. That is what is happening in Israel now as the population finds itself on that slippery slope, quickly sliding into autocracy and eventually no democracy for them, as there has never been for Palestinians under the yoke of Israel. That which I do unto my brother, I do unto myself, for I am my brother's keeper. We would be remiss to omit the fact that there are Israelis, as there were Hutus, Hindus, and Germans previously mentioned. I spoke about them, who have been brave and have always stood for justice. Some who have been ennobled by suffering, but unfortunately they're in the minority. These Israelis include the whistleblowers who opened the eyes of the world on this day Timon detention camp, and those who, despite the taunts and the isolation they might feel from the majority in science, hold the pictures of babies and children in Gaza who are starving because of Israeli man-made famine or have been slaughtered. These souls and Haaretz newspaper, the longest running Israeli newspaper in print since 1918, are the hope, the light for the future of a just and humane Israel. But what did the prophet say? Will be part of a state, not the one stated in visions. The unintended consequences that Israel will experience will, to the eyes of the soul, actually be intended consequences. And this is where it's interesting now, something about the truth that is reincarnation and its facts. Such consequences as we will include the sullying of the name Jew, which unfortunately will enter in the same infamy of the Nazis, because many people are not going to distinguish between what Israel is doing and the name Jew, right? And we know that many Jews, perhaps the majority, are not with what's going on. So what do I mean by this? If you will recall, miscreant souls, they come to create chaos, revenge, or just lust for power. All three. Could be 1, 2, 3, right? And that's what's going on here. What has happened with the Nazis? When you say the name Nazi, well, it's totally destroyed. It's just this terrible. It's associated with terrible things. Now, for some of them, they blame what happened to the Jews, what they did to the Jews, as to why Nazism should be associated like that. So for some of them, it's an added bonus when they reincarnated that they were going to sully. They reincarnated in the imprint Jew, because at the same time it was available. And in that case, they were able now to weaponize the suffering. And an added bonus through the eyes of the soul would be now, once they did all they had to do in order to realize their supremacist agenda, they would commit all these atrocities, and the added bonus would be that the name Jew would be sullied, would be just as, let us say, dirty as Nazi. So that's an added bonus for them. So that is on the temporal lens. In the world, we think it is an unintended consequence, right? But when you dig down deep into the deep structure through the spiritual lens, it was intended. It's revenge, a sort of revenge. Many will not distinguish, as I said, between what Zionist Jews and Christians and Jews, right? In this sense, they will have succeeded with sullying the name Jew and what we believe of Jew, the persecuted and whatever. Now they will be associated with genocide and massacres, right? Recall, okay, so we went over that. Through both the temporal and spiritual lens, the unintended consequences include the prophecies of one of the state and the Exodus, which we went over. They will not succeed. Eventually, they're not going to succeed. What Netanyahu is not going to succeed. It will become one of the many corpses of history, littered in the fields of history, of empire builders, supremacist ideology and practices. Remember that we are winning until we are not. The large fire that we started in a dry season to burn everyone will eventually burn us. We can go no further than the length of our rope. The clock of the universe is the ultimate arbiter. When we refuse to learn, as I was reading a book actually by a wonderful psychic medium. I can't remember the name of the book right now. And I think she said something like, when we refuse to learn, the lesson will find us when we don't heed. So that brings us to the end of the series of videos on supremacist ideology and practices, and they have been long ones, and I know with our busy time we don't have time to sit and listen straight, but you listen a little and then you know what to do, and then you come back to it, and till you eventually get to the end. So that is the end of supremacist ideology and practices. And please do not forget, you can go to my website and then check under kindness. That section, kindness, and you'll find the listing of those organizations. And you can get on there and see where they say to donate. They are mostly United Nations organizations, for refugees and children and what have you. And I have something there for children in Israel, actually, because some of them were orphaned, I believe, during the October 7th and what have you. And, there's poverty, a lot of poverty in Israel. And if you can help. And that's it. So, thank you once again for visiting my channel, and please do not forget to subscribe. Give a thumbs up for like, share, and leave a comment. As usual, I like to end with this: none of us is without blemish, and although I appear harsh, I must deliver the messages as I get them. What I do and what the collective would like. As harsh as we sound, wish that all of us would do better. Recognize that we're all brothers in this brotherhood of man. Take care of our children, because each child belongs to all of us, no matter the mask. There's always a tear to spare for each one of them, and a drop of empathy in our cup for them, because that cup of empathy can never run dry, and there's always a tear to spare. Hate, hitching a ride, hate a contagion, a cancer metastasizing, an opportunistic bacteria, the cloud waiting to block the sun. Hate, waiting to hitch a ride on the train of love. Hate, the rat on its rat passage, hitching a ride on the boat to the plague. Hate, the bedbug waiting for our suitcase. Hate, the roach riding on our coattails. Hate, the shadow always lurking behind, sometimes longer than us. Hate, just lurking behind the thin curtain, waiting for its turn on center stage to take us to a place not so far away. A blast back from civilization to barbarism, from knowledge back to ignorance, from wisdom back to impudence. Hate never takes a holiday, always looking for an opportunity to hitch a ride on the train of love. Hate inhabits the same house as love within us. None of us is without blemish. Always remember that. And we all live in glass houses. We are all tenants on this earth, not here to have dominion or rule over anything or anyone. We are not here to have dominion over the fowl of the air, the fish in the sea, or the beasts in the fields. We're not here to have supremacy over our brothers. Let us be good tenants. Let us take care of ourselves and of each other. Let us trod ever so lightly and take care of this planet we call Earth and all the creatures that dwell thereon. Remember that there is something that is greater than us, and that is the fatherhood of God. We respect and show our love for that something that is greater than us by taking care of ourselves, the planet, and each other. May we never try to may we never try to flee. Guess I'm tired. May we never try to flee our conscience so that we will always do correct actions. May we learn to walk a mile in our brother's shoes so that we can see the humanity in each other. May we respect the differences in each other and know that our Creator has no chosen few. May we find comfort in the knowledge that each of us is slated for redemption. None is excluded. May we find solace in the knowledge that it is not a question of if, but one of when each of us shall return to the Father. May we know that we're just tenants on this earth and take care of each other, the earth and all the creatures that dwell thereon. May we always adhere to the principles, the divine principles of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, doing unto others as we would have others do unto us, love. That may we know, that which I do unto my brother, I do unto myself for I am my brother's keeper. May the tiny shrouds of light forever illuminate our path through the dark. May peace forever reside within us and between us, one divine, universal love.